Hello, this is Andy, the piano player. If you want to hear my piano playing, you can go right now or at any time to youtube.com/Starsworth. That's Starsworth, one word, combining the word stars with the word worth, Starsworth. If you want to hear me talk, I'm going to talk for a while now, and I might talk extemporaneously. I'm not talking off a prompt, but I want to talk about what I have come to believe is complex post-traumatic stress disorder in my experience. First, I want to identify my location. This is my apartment. It's a one-bedroom apartment. It rents for $490. I've got a spare room. Well, it's the bedroom, but I don't sleep there. I let people sleep there sometimes, and sometimes people who are struggling or they're outdoors, outside in the cold. If I have a good feeling about that person, I will let them crash in that room. And I always sleep out in the living room, so it doesn't really matter. It's no skin off my back, and there's a nice bathroom, hardwood floor, linoleum, nice kitchen. It's really a nice old 50s style apartment on the second floor too. And close to the downtown, which is good because I don't have a car right now. And I walk everywhere, and that's fine. My world is a little small geographically, but it's still a lot larger than it was when I was living on the streets, and I was kind of stranded outside there for a while. So I'm pretty grateful for this place and pretty happy with my life today. Now, complex post-traumatic stress disorder differs from the traditional PTSD, which I'm sure you've heard about, and with which I have also been diagnosed. I was diagnosed with PTSD in June of 2004. I mentioned May 17th of that year was the first year that I could be found sleeping outdoors. And I was traveling around. I was trying to get back to Stockton. I was down in the Bay Area. I remember finally a buddy of mine just gave me $3 so I could get across the bay, and then I was able to get a bunch of money out of my checking account. Well, actually, to be honest, I cashed out my IRA of like $1,000 at a bank in Berkeley, because what was the IRA? I mean, I didn't have a penny to my name, and people tried to talk me out of it, but I could have used the money. Thankfully, I got it. Then I got on a train to Stockton, and then I got into a hotel there. I didn't have a photo ID at this time for whatever reason. A lot of things were stolen, but I didn't have any identification, so I had to find a hotel that would take me in, and this guy took me in. It was the City Motel, and people often called it the Shitty Motel, just to paraphrase what it was actually named and describe what it was actually like. It was in a really bad part of town. There were hookers all over the place and in the parking lot. And one day, I'm not going to go into lurid detail, but one day somebody knocked on the door, and that was when I learned, welcome to homelessness. You don't answer the door when somebody knocks on the door in one of those hotels. When a very large black man entered, and the rest is history. I was sexually assaulted for a prolonged period of time. Now, that's in the past. It's 2004. I went to get help. They had to take me to the Women's Center because it was kind of a cross case where usually the sexual assault, at least in that day and age, was considered to often be towards women, but men also get raped, and I did. So the social workers there were very kind and very compassionate, directed me to the San Juan County Mental Health Center, where I found a therapist, and the therapist diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder. So that was that, but it was also, like I'm saying, welcome to homelessness. It was part of a long series of things with my life threatened, people threatening to knock the crap out of me seeing friends of mine die, me seeing friends of mine be beat up. One time I saw all my possessions burned by arson, just by a tweaker who had been up for 5 or 6 days. He thought it was funny, and I lost my music, I lost my CDs, I lost a laptop in there. All this stuff was burned, even though I had minimal possessions, it was all I had, and most of it was related to my musical work, so I wasn't too happy about that. And then also I had 4 laptops stolen in a 4-year period of time, or 3 years actually, in Berkeley. I think it took a while for the first one to be stolen, but 1, 2, 3, 4, one guy got it twice. I was a mark after I had the first laptop stolen. And so then after a while, after the 4th one was stolen, I just said, okay, I'm not even going to wear a backpack. I'm going to divest myself of everything. And I've been writing music using this music notation software that I downloaded onto these laptops. I said, forget it. I'll just write the rest of the musical in my head, and then when I ever get inside, I'll, have a laptop again and I'll score it down. But anyway, these were the kinds of things that happened. Like the first time a laptop was stolen, I was pistol whipped. I was, got a mark under my eye where the guy, almost took my eye out, basically. But I think he knew what he was doing. It was right under the eye and something on my back. And I just said, take it. These guys run off with my laptop and my backpack. This was outside McDonald's, about 5:30 in the morning. I was waiting for the McDonald's to open up, and I think I nodded out, and I heard this voice going, hey, do you really need this thing? And was shaking the laptop back and forth. I started saying, yeah, I do. And then I felt the guy hit his gun on my back and then pistol whipped me beneath the eye. I said, take it. And I stared at the guys. I was thinking, who are these guys? Wait, that one guy, he's a runner. The way he is running, the way he's jogging, he's thinking not about where he's going. He's thinking about his form, and that gave me a clue. Then I saw the guy again later on the streets. Plus, when they steal from you on the streets, they try to ingratiate you. I think they're trying to pretend that they didn't steal from you, or they're trying to get you to think they didn't, or they're just trying to make it up to you because they feel guilty. It's this weird dynamic on the streets. The guy just came up and he said, I got a hotel room, you want to play chess? I got weed there, marijuana, I got 2 hookers, and well, anyway, I like to play chess, so I went up there. He said he had some food from McDonald's, and the other guy was there. I recognized them both, and they were just both there, the black guy and the white guy who stole my first laptop. And I could tell about all the other 3 laptops, but let's save that for another day. The point is, you get knocked around, you get threatened, and you see a lot of people beat up, you see people die. They die overnight of hypothermia. And here's the thing that's sad, is that when I was gathering information about people on the streets and talking to street people, about 3 out of 4 of them had just fallen into hard times. They couldn't keep up the rent, or they had done a good thing that made them homeless, like they had paid medical bills for a dying parent or something, and then they had to grieve and they didn't have money and they wound up on the streets. A lot of people got there just because they cannot keep up with the rising cost of rent. And people think that a person becomes homeless, it's generally thought it's because of some defect in the person's character. Well, be that as it may, it is not generally thought that the person becomes homeless because of a lack of affordable housing. And yet that is the greatest cause. About drug addicts, according to the National Council on Drug Addiction and Alcoholism, 26.2% of people on the streets are drug addicted. Whoop-de-doo. What about the other 74%? You see what I'm saying? About 3 out of the 4 people I met had believable stories of hard times they'd fallen into that were largely financial. I would say 25% got there because they had a drug or alcohol problem or a mental health problem and they could no longer be sane enough or functional enough to pay their rent. And then there were the street people, 2nd and 3rd generation street people. They just showed up, they came out of the woodworks, and they stole from you, and they assumed that you were a criminal, and if you weren't, they tried to make you one. And that was the scariest of all. Like, nobody who stole these laptops was somebody who lived inside and had their own laptop. They were all other street people, and those laptops were sold for drugs in a short period of time, I am sure. Well, anyway, all this stuff of living in the unpredictable world of the streets in this violent, volatile culture for years where I was completely vulnerable gave me PTSD of a nature that they call complex PTSD. I'm going to read a definition here, or a description. It's just from Wikipedia. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is a stress-related mental disorder generally occurring in response to complex traumas, commonly prolonged or repetitive exposures to a series of traumatic events, within which individuals perceive little or no chance of escape. And that's how we got. I was homeless for 12 years. I didn't think I was ever going to escape from it. The longer I was homeless, the more I thought I was going to die a meaningless, miserable death in some Bay Area gutter. That I even escaped it's little short of miraculous, to be honest with you. I just thought I was going to die there. Friends of mine were waiting to read my obituary, but I did not die. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the life I have today. I only want to do God better justice than I have been doing. So I created this channel. I'm trying to get these stories, these accounts of my homeless experience out there so people can be informed and awareness can be raised, and also many people will identify, because I am not the only one, I'm sure. I'm going to read on here. These are significant symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. One is emotional dysregulations. I've got that. In fact, I think I've always had that, before I was even on the streets. Negative self-beliefs, I've definitely got that. And a lot of people in the homeless world, they get this incredibly low self-esteem. It was really common to think, if I ever get inside again, if I can ever manage to hang on to a living situation for longer than 4 or 5 months, people believed themselves incapable of living indoors ever again. And that was the prevalent attitude, and it kind of was contagious, and it kind of spread. I got to where I did not believe that I could ever get into the place where I simply paid my rent every month and paid my bills and survived an indoor living. And that's what I've done. I have survived an indoor living. So far. Anyway, these are interesting. Negative self-beliefs, feeling of shame, guilt, feelings of failure for wrong reasons. What else? Interpersonal difficulties. And a lot of this is like borderline personality disorder. I don't believe I have that, but it's very similar, and because I do have some good friends, and I've managed to maintain some positive relationships, largely by reducing my expectations of other people. I used to expect too much of them, and I've been training myself to expect less of people. So anyway, yeah, borderline personality disorder, DID, dissociative identity disorder, these are a lot like PTSD. Now, in my experience, what I want to talk about is 4 aspects of the way I was treated, the way we were all treated when we were homeless, that have carried over. And if I start to be treated like that now, I really freak. Because as soon as I got off that bus, within 2 or 3 weeks, I was writing to my pastor at the Lutheran Church down in Berkeley, and I was just saying, this is the first time, Sharon, Pastor Sharon, this is the first time since my mother died 12 years ago that I believe I am not in a state of shock. I just felt like I was alive again and awake to the world. But the downside is that every now and then something comes about that resembles so much something that happened on the streets that since I am no longer in that constant state of shock on the streets and the battle zone there, it freaks me out. I used to be able to handle it, just I rolled with the punches, many punches. I just wrote it all off my back. But now that I'm inside, I've become softer, and that's fine. I've become gentler. And when it happens, and somebody is treating me the way they treated me on the streets, I can freak. Hours will go by, and I won't even be able to concentrate. Now, it doesn't happen every day. It doesn't even happen every month. Sometimes there are 2 or 3 in a row in a month, but basically I would say once about every 5 months it happens to a bad extent, and it happens according to certain triggers. I'll talk about that later. I've been about removing these triggers. Like it used to be the doctors, because I was blaming the doctors for my homelessness, all the pills they gave me, and all the diagnoses, mental health diagnoses that failed and seemed to contribute to my dissension towards the streets. But now I have a really good doctor, so I'm not triggered by the doctors anymore because I like this guy. So you can deal with the triggers. It used to be a family member, but now I have determined a way to get along with that family member and expect less of that person, and that person does not trigger me anymore. So I know some of the triggers, but some of them just still take me by surprise. They're all in 4 general areas, which I call criminalization, infantilization, objectification, and dehumanization. Criminalization. There was a set of people on the streets, and a lot of them were street people, who believed that I was a criminal. They believed that anybody in that position was a criminal. And there were sometimes cops assumed I was a criminal. Here, I'll give you 2 examples. I was running one time, because I've mentioned I like to run. I'm a long distance runner. And I saw a homeless guy I barely recognized from one of the feeds, places where they give you food at a church. And he just shouted at me. He was sure I had just committed a crime. And he was like, "Where are you running from? What did you do, man? What did you do?" I was just running for exercise. See, that's a criminalization. Another one, the cops one time, I was walking by McDonald's, and these 3 cops come up and say, "Hey, were you involved in that fight that broke out at McDonald's yesterday?" I don't have a fighting bone in my life. I think I have been in a few fights, but I I fought hard to avoid fights, put it that way, and I never got in a fight on the streets. I didn't start one, but I was assaulted, strong arm robbery, this kind of thing, but I was never in a fight, a one-to-one fist fight. Infantilization usually came from a different group of people, and I hate to say it, but a lot of times they were well-meaning social workers, and they acted as though, even though I was 51 years old when I became homeless, they acted like every decision I had made in my life beforehand must have been wrong, and it was like, oh, poor Andy, there you are, good Andy, we'll help you tie your shoe. I mean, it was just, they were treating me like a child, and it was just darned insulting and just demeaning and hard to deal with. I knew how to do all these things they were teaching me how to do, and in a sense, I knew more than they did, because they didn't know me, and they didn't know anything about living outside, because they never had. I had lived both inside and outside, so I knew about both worlds. I don't know why they were trying to teach me menial, simple things, because I could have been teaching them things. Objectification, this is a really hard one, but it's like it was very common for people to pass by and refer to me in third person with words like he and him, and not make eye contact and not address me in second person. Like, what do you think about this? It was like, well, I wonder what this guy thinks. Well, this guy's sitting here, and they would have a conversation about me right in front of my face. I was not even a human being. I was an object. Another thing is when you were sleeping, and get real, I'm going to include me on this, when we walk through the sidewalks, walk through the streets of Seattle, and observe all the homeless people sleeping on the sidewalks, do we pay any particular attention to their humanity? People regard them as things. I hate to say it, we step over them, talk really loud. Can you imagine? We used to sleep 4 guys by the California Theater underneath the awning in Berkeley. There would be 4 of us sleeping, and these people that worked at the theater would come out really late at night and be chatting and laughing and all that. Could you imagine one of those 4 homeless guys pulling up the blankets and say, excuse me, we're trying to get some sleep here, could you hold it down? That would be equivalent to Rosa Parks on the bus, seriously. If homeless rights activism ever got that sophisticated, and I just hope that some homeless people are doing that by now, because I've been out here 8 years and I'm speaking from my experience. I follow sites like Invisible People. That's a good one if you want to go to YouTube and check out Invisible People. They have interviews with homeless people telling stories very much like mine. Objectification, when you are treated as an object and not a human being. And finally, that leads to the 4th one, dehumanization. We had an expression, we are treated not as humans, but as subhuman mutants, like a different species. And for years, I was not treated as a person, as an equal. I was treated as a homeless person, as an inferior. And it laid a trip on my head, it really did. And it affected my self-esteem. But about the C-PTSD, sometimes, not very often, but like one time I was sitting in a cafe and an elderly woman was knitting, and I don't know if she was stoned or whatever, but she found it entertaining or whatever to just stare directly at me while she was knitting, and I felt objectified. I bet women and men, but I wonder how beautiful women who are always being ogled, I'm not a woman, so I don't identify with how that feels, but I did not feel good when this woman was just objectifying me, and it threw me back to homelessness. I could barely handle it. Yeah, before homelessness, I might have thought, she's on a weird trip, maybe gotten up and moved, but I just really freaked because it threw me back to homelessness. Yeah, that's one example I can say of objectification and of dehumanization. There's just nothing has happened like that up here. I very seldom infantilize unless I run into some, especially motherly or codependent person, and it might trigger it, but, it's nothing like the social workers were doing down there. They were treating me as though I hadn't ever learned to do one thing right in my life. Otherwise, why am I homeless? Okay, criminalization. Yeah, it's happened a couple times. Cops have come into the recovery center. There's been some kind of issue, and there'd be a look, and I would think they were kind of treating me like a criminal. And there might have been people who had been in and out of jail sitting in the recovery center. But, you know, it really hasn't happened that bad. But the main thing that happens, and this continues to happen, is in a general sense, and it's around the word respect. We all want to be respected. We all want to be treated as equals. And that goes for homeless people too. I felt I was disrespected. The other day I felt somebody disrespected me. Somebody has continued to disrespect my wishes, and if they continue to disrespect my politely stated wishes with the word please, you know, no, please don't talk about your musical project again. I've already told you it's not my thing. I cannot work on it. Or, you know, please do not recommend a psychiatric drug to me because you take it. I have a doctor, I have a therapist, I have a recovery coach. You see what I'm saying? If I feel that somebody is disrespecting me, then that will throw me back to homelessness. And like when that guy disrespected me the other day, or I thought he disrespected me, 8 hours later I was still tripping. I couldn't do any work. This is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not just a flashback where you freak out, oh my gosh, you know, the kamikaze plane is coming, the ship is breaking in half or whatever, you know, from the war, from World War II or whatever. It's not like that. It's like you start tripping and you can't get off that trip. You ruminate. They call it rumination. They call it exacerbation. Exacerbations of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That is what I have to deal with today. But the good news, aside from that, Jesus Christ died for my sins and was resurrected for my sanctification, for my justification, and I will be glorified with all the other saints in heaven one day, hopefully soon. Aside from that majorly good news, the good news is that it doesn't happen every day, and I'm still able to make strides. I'm able to make progress with this horrible disease of the mind, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll talk to you again later. I hope you got something out of this and enjoyed my talk.